Hello, you're watching Gamer to Coder, and this is episode 7. In case this is the first time you're watching, I'm on a mission to learn programming. In last week's episode, I followed various free code camp JavaScript tutorials, picking up concepts such as the date object, local storage, and some DOM manipulation. To put these concepts into practice this week, I created my own project, an event countdown app that allows the user to input an event and the date it is happening, and then it will show them how many days it is until said event. But first, I decided it was time to see what Git and GitHub was all about. As going forward, I would like to start using version control and sharing my code. Also, many YouTube videos have told me that this is the way it's done in the real world, so I'd like to get used to using these tools. Therefore, I watched these tutorials from Super Simple Dev, which are excellent by the way, and I'll leave links to them in the description, before I did any actual programming this week, which helped me pick up the basics of Git and GitHub, and I'm also going to put this knowledge I've gained into practice with this week's project also. So, without further ado, let's dive into the project. I started by creating the GitHub repository, then using the commands provided on GitHub to set up my local repository. Next, I got ChatGPT to create a basic interface using HTML and CSS, because my current goal is of course to learn JavaScript, and this week I didn't have the time to do the HTML and CSS myself. This also ended up being my first ever Git commit, that is without the help of a tutorial. Then it was time for the JavaScript. And the way I start these mini projects is always by creating a bit of a plan with comments, and I just write out what each function is going to be needed and what it's going to do. And it just helps me visualize the way the program will work. Next, I assigned all the elements I needed from the HTML to JavaScript variables and created a function that displays the form to add an event, which works by using the classList.toggle function to hide the container where users can view their events, and changes the form container to visible. Next, I created a function to do some basic validation on the user's inputs, which uses an if statement to check the user has filled out all the fields and ensures the user can only put future dates for the events. Then I created the function that saves the user's event. For this to work, I first needed an array of all the events already stored in local storage, or if there weren't any, I needed an empty array. This is defined at the top of the file. Then I created an ID for the event by taking the name of the event, making it lowercase, removing spaces, and adding the timestamp on the end to make it unique, before creating an event object, storing the user's inputs, which I then pushed to the events array, setting the events key in local storage to be set to the events array. So local storage is always the same as the events array. And finally, I called a function that toggles the add event form, so it effectively closed the event form after the user has saved their event. After that, I created the function to display all the events the user has created. The first thing it does is clear the current HTML within the container, otherwise the user would see duplicates of their events. Next, it checks if the events array is empty, and if it is, it outputs a placeholder to say that there have been no events added yet. However, if the events array is not empty, there is a for each loop that loops through all the events, calculates how many days away they are, and outputs a card for each. Finally, I create the function for deleting an event. The first thing I needed to do was tweak the previous function I'd made for displaying events, so that when it loops through the events, it also includes the index of the event, which is then passed to this current function as a parameter using onClick and calling the function. This index is then used with splice to remove it from the events array. Then local storage is updated to match the events array. and the display events function is called so that the displayed events are also up to date. Here in the background, you'll see a full demo of the application, and I really enjoyed creating this one, and it definitely got me thinking, especially when it came to the date objects and their various methods, because I don't feel like they're completely simple or straightforward, and they definitely require a little bit of brain power to figure out sometimes. But anyway, that's all for this week. Next week, I'll be back to picking up new concepts with free code camp and tutorials, so be sure to tune in for that one. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you then.